Why don't each of you take 1 minute and just introduce yourselves and tell everyone what you've been doing for the last 20 years, just so everyone can hear your voice and get to know you a bit. Dr. Helman, would you go first?
Sure. So my name is Dr. Josh Helman, and about a dozen years ago, I actually attended this conference in Orlando. It was in person at that time, and this conference was transformational in my life in terms of I had a dozen years ago. I was 50 pounds overweight, had high blood pressure, and despite 2 degrees from Harvard, I thought I was a smart physician. I could not figure out how to solve my own issues without finding something like this. So this conference, I never imagined that I would be a speaker or a panelist, but this has been amazing. And my own background, 2 degrees in biochemistry, 2 degrees in Harvard, medical doctor, double board certified in both emergency medicine, lifestyle medicine. My focus now is reversing Alzheimer's. My grandmother had Alzheimer's when I was a teenager, so I saw firsthand how devastating it is, not just for my grandma, but my parents' generation. They're thinking, hey, this is happening to Grandma Eileen now. What's going to happen to us in 20 or 30 years? So I'm currently the medical director at Hippocrates, and my focus is reversing Alzheimer's. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Shah?
So I actually grew up as a vegetarian and I was always interested in health. And the reason I chose homeopathy is because I didn't want to use chemical medications to help people. And I became a doctor to reduce suffering. And when I found out that, because I thought that I'm a vegetarian and I'm not doing any harm, but when I found out that consuming dairy was killing calves, I changed my diet. And when I changed my diet, I started seeing the effects of plant-based diet in books and medical journals because I didn't know about it before I changed my own diet. And I had the same questions that many people do, like where will I get my protein as a vegetarian or calcium? And so I started reading more. And the more I read, the more I understood how powerful a plant-based diet can be. And I started telling my patients about it. And I would ask my patients if they wanted me to treat them or if they wanted me to teach them how to heal themselves. And obviously, they said the latter. But when I would tell them about it, many of them dropped off the wagon and my practice fell. But then I realized that the reason they don't stick with me is because they're afraid of deprivation. I was doing it at a time when there was no soy milk in India, no vegan alternatives. And so I started doing a 1 day program called Peas versus Pills, where I would serve breakfast and lunch and even a high tea that was enough for dinner so that they would recognize that the food could be delicious. We'd have cooking classes. And then I started training other doctors and nutritionists. And now we have a team of 50 people at Sharan in India.
Thank you. Okay, my first question I'd like for both of you to answer. Dr. Shah, you stated that sugar is not the primary cause of diabetes in most cases, but rather insulin resistance caused by fat. Could you explain this distinction further? And then if Dr. Hellman could comment.
Sure. So, most people, when they go to the doctor with diabetes, the doctor tells them to cut down their sugar and cut down their carbohydrates. And of course, this may control the blood sugar, but it doesn't help reverse diabetes. So, if we want to get rid of any problem, we need to understand the cause of that problem. And the cause of diabetes is not sugar, but insulin resistance. And so if we work at the level of insulin resistance and understand the causes of insulin resistance, then we can get rid of diabetes.
And I would agree 100%. So this is not generally taught in medical curricula. It's not it wasn't taught in the basic biochemistry that I learned, but going back and looking at the research, this is true. And then also clinically, say, taking care of a patient who is eating purely fruit, let's say just eating raw fruit, a fruitarian. It turns out that fruitarians have some of the most are some of the most sensitive people to insulin. So, which flies in the face of people, oh, sugar is going to cause diabetes. I would say, though, that the key is you want complex carbohydrates in the form of plants, fruit, etc. You're exactly right. What happens is fat gets deposited within muscle cells and other cells. It's called intramyocyte lipids, and it basically gums up the insulin receptor and leads to insulin resistance. And unfortunately, as there's more and more fat in the Western diet with added oils, for example, I think that's why we're seeing rates of diabetes exploding, and frankly, with India, as the Indians adopt a more Western lifestyle, I think we're also seeing it there too.
Yeah, sure. India
Okay.
has one of the largest populations of diabetes in the world now.
Okay, so you're saying that sugar is not the primary cause, but insulin resistance caused by fat. So assuming that someone has been listening to this conference, and they've heard over and over to eat a whole food, plant-based diet of fruits, vegetables, beans, grains, nuts, and seeds. So if they're already not eating animal products, does that solve the problem? Or are you also talking about the fat from one avocados, two olives, three raw nuts, four raw seeds?
For me?
Both of you, I'd like to
Okay.
let us know what your
Okay.
thought is.
Okay, so I usually ask people to think about what nature designed for us to eat. For example, if we were on a farm or an orchard and we see fruits and vegetables, instinctively we feel like picking them and eating them. And when we say, fruits, and honestly, I do a 21-day health retreat where we do all the tests at the beginning and all the tests at the end and cut down medications during the retreat. And we allow people to choose what they want to eat. And we do it in the season of mangoes in June. So people really enjoy mangoes. Many of them come from all over the world. And those who have diabetes get well even eating mangoes and green smoothies and other fruits. So I know that, the main cause is fat. And when we talk about fat, if we think about what we were designed to eat, if you're in nature and you see nuts on the ground, um, say walnuts on the ground, and you have to open them and you don't have tools, but you're opening them with a stone, you won't eat more than a few walnuts. And almonds are more difficult to get into, and cashews even more, and pistachios you can't even open without heating. So these are not foods that nature designed for us because we can't naturally open these foods in nature. Imagine if a squirrel can open a walnut, but we can't. How beautifully nature has designed things so that we eat the foods that are natural for us. So I just ask my patients to think about what are the foods that nature or God designed for us to eat. And I live in a place where we have avocados, but only 2 months of the year because that's the season of avocados. Or we have mangoes for only 2 months of the year or 3 months. So we can't be eating something all year round like you can in the US. But so I believe all your food can't be just avocados. And definitely we recommend no more than 10 nuts a day. Don't eat it as a snack, but use it as an ingredient to make your dressings or desserts or cheeses or whatever you need to make to enjoy your food. So once we're thinking that way, or we don't use any man-made substance like not even olive oil or coconut oil or any oil. So yeah, that's how it is. But I believe that, nature is our guide. Like, for example, I live on the beach in South India, and there are coconut trees all around me. And it's very difficult to get a tender coconut. Like, for example, when we get coconut water, then you need it from a tender coconut, and that's difficult to get. But if you get it, it has very little fat and very little fiber. But if you have a mature coconut, it has a lot of fat and a lot of fiber. So nature is so wise that where there's a lot of fat, there's a lot of fiber. So you can't overeat because when you're eating it whole. Does that make sense?
Yes, so
Oh
you're
yeah.
saying to have seeds and nuts and avocado. Well, seeds and nuts, you're saying as like part of a dressing, but not as a snack.
Yes, not as a snack.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
I yeah, go ahead.
and even if you think about seeds like sunflower seeds, if you had to open them yourself, you can't eat so many. But when you buy them in a bag, you can just, So we have to look at them like how much could we eat if we were in nature?
Yeah, and I agree with Dr. Shah. I mean, for most people, you don't want to be eating large amounts of avocados, nuts. I mean, and the amount is like one handful of nuts, 1 ounce. As you said, Dr. Shah, basically as a seasoning on on top of your salad to make your salad taste a little bit better. And the reason for that for most people is if you eat a high fat diet, unfortunately, you're going to get something called sludge blood, where the fat will layer out and cause something called rouleau or stack of red blood cells that is much harder for your heart to pump. And if you look at the blood under a microscope, you see evidence of inflammation. And I say that's true for most people. Now, there are a few patients I see who are severely underweight, and then it makes sense to maybe give more oils or very high calorie dense foods. But that's a very small minority of patients. For most people, you don't want to be adding oil and lots of avocados and fat like that.
Okay, so we wake up tomorrow morning. You've told us to not eat animal products, so we're going to be whole food plant-based. You're saying nuts really are part of the dressing. They're not supposed to be an all-day snack, or same with avocados, saying minimize fat. So now we're back to we're going to eat vegetables. We'll eat whatever vegetables we could find. And then to get full, um, it sounds like what you're saying is we're going to have to eat a lot of beans and whole grains. Is that and sweet potatoes and squashes? Would that be the diet, or are you saying is it more fruit? Like what are we getting full on, or are we supposed to be getting full on the greens and the vegetables?
I would say I agree with Dr. Shah. You want variety, and if you live in a country where, mango season is only 2 months, then those 2 months you eat a lot of mangoes. I don't think there's a one type of food, for everyone all time. But what I do think is that you want a variety because with a variety of different foods, you're going to promote diversity in the microbiome in the different bacteria in your gut. And normally, if you have a diversity in your gut, that's going to lead to better health well, actually, it's going to lead to lower inflammation, which you're less likely to get diabetes or Alzheimer's or other chronic conditions.
Um,
True. And I just wanted to say that the higher the nutrient content of the food, the more full you're going to be. For example, if you make a fruit smoothie and you use a banana and maybe a few strawberries or two bananas, it may not fill you up. But if you throw in those green leaves, even though it doesn't alter the taste too much, it fills you up because of the nutrient value without giving you calories. Or like if you eat brown rice or whole grains instead of semi-polished or polished grains, then you get much more full just because of the fiber. So we want to hold on to all the fiber. And most of the skin outside of any plant or fruit or vegetable has a lot of nutrients. So if we don't take off the peel of the ones that we can't peel with our bare hands, then we would get those nutrients and that would be nu nutrient dense as well. So a bit of both, like the beans and the cooked grains and um, the squashes and all of that that's filling, or the root vegetables, but also make sure that it's whole.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Helman, you work at Hippocrates Health Institute, and they serve raw food. So twice a day, they have a big raw salad of vegetables, sprouts, and dressings made of oil or seeds, and they minimize fruit. They're different. Aside from Gabriel Cousins, almost every other speaker speaks about cooked vegan food, such as cooked vegetables, cooked beans, cooked whole grains. Um, and I guess the question is, if you're going to eat cooked beans and cooked whole grains, it's easy to get filled up. But if you're going to eat raw, like you are at Hippocrates on
Right.
sprouts, then it seems that you do need to go heavier on the fats, on the oils, and the avocados if you're going to get filled up. So the question is, should you A, use a lot of fats and stay raw and get filled up? Or should you abandon the idea of being a raw foodist and eating mostly raw green sprouts and vegetables and then just eat the beans, the grains, the squashes, the sweet potatoes, and not use fats on those, but you still get full because those are heavier?
I would say you would either do the second option or the third option, which I recommend, is that you eat and what we do at Hippocrates, sure, you have two large meals of salads, of raw sprouts, etc. a day, and then in between you have green juice a couple times a day and some wheatgrass juice. So the interesting thing about human physiology is, just drinking a glass of water can take away hunger. And I understand when, if you're currently on a Western diet and, you need a candy bar every hour, every couple hours, it's going to take you a little while to get to it. But once you go through the pain of changing your diet for a week or two or three, you can actually train your body to, if you're feeling hungry, start with some water or start with some green juice. So what I would say is I would normally recommend the third option where you're eating mainly plants, but without adding the oil. And again, just to be clear, at Hippocrates, you can get an oil-free dressing. It's not normally what they serve. They normally serve dressings with oil. But from my understanding, Ann Wigmore, who was the philosophy behind Hippocrates, actually advocated for a low-fat diet. And and based on the biochemical research I've looked at, is when you eat a high-fat meal, unfortunately, not only are you potentially leading to insulin resistance and the risk of diabetes, but you are also causing, as I mentioned before, this sludge blood or, the fat will layer out. So to my mind, the ideal diet is a diet without added salt, oil, and sugar, and mainly whole plants. Now, I understand the audience members may not be on anything even close to that. And literally, it took me many years to transition from a Western diet to the pure type of diet that I'm on now. And I'm not perfect, but having said that, I'm probably about 80% raw. I eat most of my meals at Hippocrates, and guess what? Friday night they do have a little bit of cooked food, and I had a little bit of cooked food tonight. But I feel a little bit slow because of it. But yeah. So in terms of overall health, you basically want to avoid processed foods with added salt, oil, and sugar. But I wouldn't beat yourself up if you're trying to make a transition and you can't get there 100%. I think the body will adapt. That's the cool thing. Because I eat sprouts all the time, I actually crave sprouts. But I bet you if I went back to how I was eating 15 years ago, eating candy bars and pizza and all this other garbage, I would be craving that stuff. Now that stuff, the thought of it makes me sick. So the cool thing is the brain will adapt to whatever diet you're on for survival, right? I mean, if you have sprouts all around you, then your brain's going to say eat sprouts. So it's really cool how the body has adapted. And the other amazing thing in our current society is we have a choice. And I understand, there may not be fast foods near you where you can go out and get sprouts, but the cool thing is in our modern society, we do have a choice. And the choice I recommend people make is eat mainly whole plants without added salt, oil, or sugar.
And when you say oil, Gabriel Cousins recommends, like, I don't know if he does it for everyone, but I've heard him to some people say take 2 tablespoons a day of olive oil. It's good for you. So I'm confused. Am I trying to completely avoid olive oil so I don't get sludge blood? Or in some cases, is there a benefit because is there some kind of health benefit? I mean, is there science about exactly the difference whether we should be adding oil to our food or not?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The science they've done experiments and they said and they've shown that sure, olive oil is better for you than having something with butter. But the reality is even olive oil, if I give you a meal and there's olive oil in it, if I look at the endothelium, if I look at your blood vessels, the insides of your blood vessels, you there will be damage to the inside of your blood vessels. They won't be able to relax after even a meal with olive oil because what happens is the oil will actually change the shape of your red blood cells. You may have seen pictures of red blood cells. They're biconcave, smooth surfaces. But after you eat a fatty meal with oils, including olive oil, you will see spikes on the red blood cells. And those spikes, when those red blood cells go through the very narrow capillaries, those spikes will actually do damage to the inside of your small blood vessels. So for that reason, I don't recommend for most people even eating olive oil. And I understand Gabriel Cousins, Brian Clement. There are definitely other people out there who are promoting olive oil, but my point is put it to the test. And the scientific literature I've seen on it is that even olive oil will cause damage to your blood vessels. And we now know that you are as healthy as your blood vessels. If you've got damaged blood vessels in your heart, in your brain, in other vessels, you're going to end up being more likely to get chronic diseases.
I would agree with him because, you know, when I moved from Mumbai, which is a very big, busy city, to the Oroville, where I live now on the beach, a cat moved in with me. I have a very open house, and the cat, we were coexisting. She wasn't my pet. I was living with her. I was watching the animals, and I realized that animals in nature know how to stay well. And every animal eats their food whole. They don't take something good out of it or put something bad into it. And olive oil is not something that's made by nature, it's something that's made by man because we're extracting it from the olives. So I never recommend olive oil either.
Okay, you also mentioned, Dr. Helman, just now, no salt, oil, or sugar. Now, there are people, um, for many, many years, there's been people saying avoid salt. But there are some people that say salt that you put on table salt has been heated to 1200 degrees and is not good for you. But the actual mineral beds where they get the salt from in its raw state is important. And there's books called like the Salts Fix. And there's people who are recommending taking a tablespoon and a half of salt with water a day for health reasons, saying you need it to balance your ratios with other minerals. So I'm quite confused. I always thought that salt was something I was trying as hard as I could to avoid, but now I'm being told that it's to take a table and a half a day of salt. I had originally heard that it caused heart attacks and strokes, and now I'm being told no. Is there science or data or something clear to help me understand how to approach salt. I certainly don't want to increase my chance of a stroke, yet I want the benefits if they're telling me that I'm supposed to have that.
Yeah, Steve. So the evidence I would suggest you look at are a few things. Number one, look at the changes in the Western American diet over the last 100 years. And if you look at a graph of the increase of salt, sodium chloride in the American diet, it's gone up tremendously uh, over the last 100 years, and up until about 1980. And in about 1980, we started realizing that if you add salt to your diet, you end up with a much higher risk of high blood pressure from the increased sodium. So about 1980, the warning came out that you need to decrease the amount of salt. So yes, if you look at 1980, it did come down, but we're still eating, the American diet still has so much more sodium than it did 100 years ago. And here's the problem. If just like I mentioned, the studies that looked at what happens if you eat a high fat or an oil diet, you get damage to the inside of your blood vessels. It turns out that if you eat a salty meal, for most people, now there are maybe 5% of people who have a different type of metabolism, but for the vast majority of people, when you give them a high salt diet, they're actually getting damage to their blood vessels. That's evidence number one. Number two is that the other scenario would be let's say you happen to be a carpenter or you work outside or you're an ultra athlete and you're literally sweating 4 hours straight in the heat almost every day. When that's happening, yes, in the sweat, you are going to need to supplement with sodium or electrolytes. But what's happened is, unfortunately, there's this whole industry now of supplementing salt, and it's a case where it's the marketing and selling the product over people's health. So from a health perspective, the vast majority of people do not need and should not be adding extra salt to their food. Now, from the big food industry perspective, they want things that are shelf stable that they can, from a distribution standpoint, have sit on a shelf of a supermarket for a year without going bad. And one way to do that is to add extra salt. So that's one reason why there's so much more salt in the American diet now than previously. But what I would encourage you to do is not look at one marketing piece. I would say just take a step back and look at the evidence. Number one, there's much more salt in the American diet now than there was 100 years ago. And frankly, if you go back thousands of years ago where humans evolved, the diet that our ancestors had normally did not have as much salt as we do on our current diet.
I kind of agree with that. And I come from a hot country where we are sweating all the time. And I've also seen that if you go to a farm sanctuary, then they leave salt licks for the animals. Or like when I went to Africa, I also saw that, you know, in the centers, they would have a salt lick so that the animals could come and have some salt. So we allow a little bit of Himalayan salt or rock salt to be added to the food. But having said that, we rarely use packaged food. Actually, we never use packaged food and not even canned beans or anything. So we do add a little bit of salt to our food. And I totally agree with you that packaged food has far too much.
And if someone has the good variety of salt, the original, not heated to 1200 degrees, not bleached salt, and they add it to the diet, does that increase their chance of stroke or heart disease, or it doesn't?
So I'm
I
not
think
100% sure, but I've never actually had people do completely salt free. So I'm sugar and oil free, but not salt free. And that's because, my endeavor is to get everyone on this diet as far as possible. And if the food, I mean, salt adds flavor to the food. So I don't say 100% salt, maybe just low salt, or have more fruits and vegetables where anyway you don't need too much salt. So I don't know for sure, but I have seen some cases of high blood pressure who do better when they cut out the salt. And many of the cases of high blood pressure that I see, they get better despite having some salt. So I'd have to look at a lot more patients to be able to say something here.
Yeah, so in my experience, people who, if they're eating extra sodium chloride salt, whatever, whether it's Himalayan salt, etc., their risk of stroke and heart disease goes up. Now, there are other salts like magnesium salts that actually will lower blood pressure and relax. And, unfortunately, most people are deficient in magnesium because the best source of magnesium is from plants. And the average American, at least, is not eating much fruits or vegetables. And so they're not getting magnesium and they're deficient in magnesium. So when I was talking about avoiding added salt, I was talking about sodium chloride.
Okay. Um, just going back to the basic first question of them all, for the people who are joining this call tonight and they eat chicken, fish, or steak every night. That's what they have every night, and they're still not, they don't feel there's that much a compelling reason to eat a whole food plant-based diet. Um, is there science, data, hard information that says that your chance of heart disease, cancer, dementia, Alzheimer's, COPD is clearly lower with a whole food plant-based diet than eating a diet that includes animal products? Is that something that we just like to think because we eat plant-based, or is there clear science about that?
There's clear published science. And, we have Dean Ornish's book, which talks about his studies, and then Caldwell Esselstyn's book, which talks about his studies. And we can't forget the China study, which combines so many studies. So there's clear evidence on this.
And I would agree that there's clear evidence that all these chronic diseases they don't go to zero, but they're much less likely if you cut out animal products and stick to whole foods without added salt, oil, and sugar. And to me, one of the most powerful pieces of evidence is when they go to uh, countries where they're eating mainly a whole food plant-based diet without animal products or very, very small amounts of animal products, they can't, it's almost impossible to find a case of a heart attack or high blood pressure. So these are, to my mind, these are symptoms of a Western unhealthy diet that in a state of nature, normally we're evolved to eat mainly plants without added salt, oil, and sugar. Because yeah, guess what? Our ancestors, most of them did not have easy access to oil.
Right. And I can vouch for that because I grew up at a time like that, where packaged food was not even available. And traditional Indian food is grains, beans, and vegetables. So, um, people were not consuming a lot of oil because it was hard to get. Now it's something that is special, and so people use a lot of oil. So things have changed remarkably from the time I became a doctor in 1981 to now. I've seen that change in our Indian population because the rates of heart attacks and diabetes has just skyrocketed.
Okay, Dr. Shah, you mentioned reversing diabetes in 21 days through diet in your residential program. Could you outline the general principles of this dietary approach?
Yeah, so basically it's about eating as close to what nature designed for us as totally whole, plant-based, and organic, because we're the only species that sprays our food with poison so that other animals don't eat it and then we eat it. And of course, all these chemicals, not just on our food, but also the chemicals that we're using on our bodies or in our spaces, all these chemicals enter our body through our mouth or through our breath or skin. And chemicals are carcinogens, chemicals are hormone disruptors. And diabetes is a hormonal problem because insulin is a hormone. So if I want to get rid of diabetes, and I want to say that in the 21-day program, we work on all kinds of diseases and not just diabetes, but if I want to get rid of diabetes, then I'm going to think, what are the causes of diabetes? And the number one cause is fat, which is what we've already talked about, but also lack of fiber, because the fiber holds on to the fat and doesn't allow it to go straight into the bloodstream. And so that sludginess, the fat goes into the bloodstream slower. So, for example, if you're eating an avocado or an olive or coconut, then you're having the fat with the fiber, and it's not going to make such a big impact on your blood. And then, of course, I also, reduce stress reduction, stopping of tea, coffee, or all substances which are harmful to our body, drugs and tobacco and alcohol and everything else. And then rest at the right time, because there are lots of people who stay up till late at night. And, our body needs exercise and rest, and both are equally important. And so our body heals during rest. So if we can get all these things in place, and we also work on the state of mind, because, I, as a homeopath, always combine mind and body, and stress is one of the major causes of disease. And I've seen so many people get diabetes because of a major stress, and then even after the stress is gone, the diabetes doesn't go away. So if we can eliminate all these causes, that's what we do in our 21-day retreats, so as to get free of diabetes. And of course, one of the other causes, I mean, one of the other things that help us get free of diabetes is cutting down the medications, because the medications are also chemicals, and everything that you put in your body is broken down by the liver, excreted by the kidneys. It's a load on the body. And as long as the body has to eliminate these medications, it can't, put all its energies on healing. So, so cutting down medicines is an important part of my program.
So just one follow-up for both of you. Um, the word stress sometimes sounds like a fluffy word. You go to a doctor and they go, well, maybe you have stress. And it's kind of like anyone could use it anytime. And you say, I'm not feeling better with the medicine or the supplement. And they go, well, you probably have stress. What, how much, what is stress? I mean, I know stress is worrying. Is that, I mean, is worrying, but how do you, what is stress? How do you get rid of it? And is this something to put attention towards? It seems like a lot of people are very intense and very passionate, and have stress. And I'm not sure, is there science that it really is bad for you, or does everyone just say it's bad for you? Like, I'm very focused on not eating animal products, but I might still get angry about something on the news and not think it's a big deal. What is both of your thoughts on this?
Yep. So my thought is that I normally see patients with chronic diseases if they're under stress. And and I'm not talking about, oh, just a little bit. I'm talking about severe stress where that there's basically no hour of the day where they can't relax. I find people under high stress are much more likely to have chronic diseases and be unable to reverse those chronic diseases, because what stress involves is the stimulation of your sympathetic system, where your body's releasing fight or flight hormones like epinephrine, norepinephrine. And those specific hormones are there for a good reason if if you see a threat and you can run away from it. The problem is, in modern society, if you're stressed because you're having a stressful commute behind the wheel of a car for an hour, or you're stressed because you feel you're addicted to your cell phone and you have to check it every 5 minutes to see if someone responded to your post, etc. So those types of stress, unfortunately, cause chronic diseases. So, but to answer your original question, what in the world is stress? Stress is a time period when your body is hyper acute, hyper aware of your environment. And again, we're not designed to spend all day in bed doing nothing. We're designed to be out there and active. But the problem and the issue is in so-called modern society, there's way too much stress.
And I believe that we experience stress through hormones. So, for example, if we are stressed, we produce adrenaline and uh, um, cortisol, for example, or epinephrine. And when animals are stressed, they produce the same hormones. So when we consume animal products, we're also borrowing their stress hormones, we're borrowing their emotions. And I've seen a lot of people when they switch to plant-based diet, they're able to tell me that there's a major change in their state of mind. Now, I also think that, the current environment anywhere in the world, the culture that we live in is stressful because we have, people have expectations of us and we're living up to certain expectations, which may be real or not real. And so we have all these stresses that maybe are not borrowed, but we have a lot of borrowed emotions from animal products. So it goes down when we start changing our diet. And I've seen that, you know, even moving from a whole food plant-based diet to a no grain or raw or fruitarian diet, it actually reduces the stress step by step as you go along. It's actually a spiritual process. And I'm not 100% raw. And I think it's because I'm not totally spiritually there as well. So if we can, um, you know, I don't know how to explain this better, but mm I can tell you a personal example that a story that I experienced that I became plant-based and I was practicing whole food plant-based diet. And I went to a conference in Spain and I flew there overnight. I landed in the morning. I was really hungry. There was this big conference hall and there was nothing vegan. Even the salads had cold cuts and egg and whatever. And I can't take those salads and throw out the animal products. So I ended up choosing French fries because it was the only vegan thing I could see. And it came with ketchup and mayonnaise on top. And so I had some, it was good. And I went to bed and I woke up the next morning and I mean, I woke up after a few hours and I experienced stress. And I remember that I had that anxiety every morning while I was growing up, all my childhood and teenagers. And I didn't realize when it went away. But when I ate that egg and that tiny bit of egg, because, I've made mayonnaise and I know that mayonnaise is mostly oil with a bit of egg. And I didn't eat so much mayonnaise on those fries. And so I know that it was just a little bit, and yet that emotion was borrowed. And I realized that I had those emotions while I was a vegetarian all my life, but it had gone when I turned vegan. And I couldn't put it together right away, but then I heard from my patients that the biggest change for them was the state of mind. And I realized that this anxiety while waking up didn't go away for 10 days for me. And then it went away, and I realized that it happens if I do by chance have something that I didn't expect to have.
Thank
as
you.
in animal-based, you know. It happened again once when somebody had set yogurt with a dairy starter, even though it was a plant-based yogurt. And I had given them the starter, but they lost the starter and they used a dairy starter. And when I tasted it, I said, yes, it's perfect. It was in one of my 21-day retreats. And the next morning, I woke up with the anxiety and I told them, this is not a non-dairy starter. This is a dairy starter. So you can imagine, like, I could tell that. And she said, yes. How did you know? But it was because I could feel that emotion in me that I didn't have before. And that's why I often think about, like, what kind of emotions we are creating in our fellow beings when we consume them, when we raise them for consumption. It's just,
Yeah,
you
it's
know.
it's it's tragic, and the biochemistry behind that is if you eat dairy, a dairy product, it's normally a very inflammatory product for our immune system because it's not human. The our body recognizes like this is not from our body, this is from another animal. And as a result, you get increased inflammation in your body, including in the brain. And the increased inflammation of the brain can trigger emotions like the anxiety that you experienced. So it's interesting, it's subtle, but we're starting to understand how what you eat affects how you feel and your future.
Thank you. Dr. Hellman, you said that you've been focusing a lot more on research regarding Alzheimer's prevention. So, um, you, what is the plan? We all have a pen and paper in our hands. We all want to know how to prevent getting Alzheimer's. What is the list of every single thing we should do to prevent Alzheimer's? And Dr. Shah, you've been focused on diabetes, anything that we could prevent to get diabetes. And I assume that whatever helps us not get diabetes and dementia also helps with every other disease. So, what is the list of exactly what we should do if we were willing to do whatever you tell us to avoid these diseases? We got our pens and papers. Number one is
Yeah,
what's the
so
list?
so I'll start and basically say if you want a complete list, definitely come to my lecture on the real truth about health on preventing and reversing Alzheimer's because I'll talk for over an hour about it. I can't fit it all into a 1 or 2 minute soundbite, but I'll try. So the first thing I would do is focus on the lifestyle changes we've just spoken about. Get some exercise, eat plants, don't add salt, oil, and sugar, don't add animal products, decrease your stress, find a community of other people. Make sure, it turns out for Alzheimer's, the number one risk factor is not enough deep N3 sleep. Make sure you focus on sleep. And so the first step is fixing these lifestyle changes. The next step is smart supplementation. And if you come to my lecture, I'll give you many, but I'll just give you one now for the sake of time. Lion's mane. It turns out that lion's mane has been shown to prevent and reverse Alzheimer's and brain damage. So I'm a big fan of lion's mane. And then if you come to my lecture, there are specific modalities that we can use to reduce the amount of toxins in your body because even if you've lived the most pure life in our modern society and not had any animal products, unfortunately, there's toxins, there are man-made toxins in the rainwater. It's all around us. So fortunately, there are medical procedures that I'll talk about specifically that will decrease the amount of toxins inside of us. And then I'll also talk about there's a new FDA approved drug for compassionate use that decreases inflammation in the brain. And I'm having amazing results so far reversing Alzheimer's with this medication that goes after galectin 3. And I'll talk about it more. But the bottom line is there is hope. There is hope. Unfortunately, my grandmother Eileen got Alzheimer's when I was a teenager, but that's a long time in the past. today in 2025, there is hope. There are, if you focus on lifestyle, smart supplementation, and find someone like me who's dedicated to protecting your brain and reversing disease, that this should be more of a theoretical concern and not an actual concern because there's so many things that you can do.
And Sharon has a 5 point plan for nutrition, and that is that everything should be plant-based, whole, organic, and vitamin B12 and vitamin D should be checked and supplemented according to the need. Vitamin B12 deficiency can occur in anyone today, whether they're vegan or non-vegan or whatever they are. So it's really important. And here in the US, a lot of the food is fortified with vitamin B12. But since, if we're eating really healthy food, we may not eat any packaged food, then we're not eating fortified food. So we really need to check and supplement vitamin B12. And vitamin D is a hormone. And I live in a country that has a lot of pollution. And, vitamin D, your body can produce by the action of the sun on the skin. But because we are dark skinned, we don't want to get even darker. So we don't spend a lot of time in the sun in India. And also because, we do spend time in the sun by force because we have to go out. But because there's so much pollution, it's not direct sun rays on the skin, but through pollution and clothes. And so almost everyone has vitamin D deficiency. So I make it a point to check each and every one of my patients and supplement according to need, not excess and not less. Even though vitamin B12 is a water soluble vitamin and it can be thrown out by the body, why load the body with more than you need? And vitamin D is a hormone, so excess is as bad as less vitamin D. And so it's really important to check and supplement these two vitamins.
Okay, and what is both of your recommendations in terms of intermittent fasting, meaning for like 16, 14, 16 hours from dinner to breakfast, weekly fasting, longer fasting? The word fasting, what would you ideally like us to do if we were willing to do it, in the short term, in the long term? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. So I'm a big fan of fasting because biochemically, the changes that happen when you fast are almost identical to when you exercise. And we know that exercise is amazing for our overall health, including our brain health. And so just like with exercise, figure out where you are today and get a little bit better. So if you're not exercising at all, start walking for 5 minutes or 10 minutes a day. The same thing with fasting. So if you're not fasting at all today, start small. Just skip breakfast. Have a wide feeding window, but don't start eating until maybe 11 o'clock in the morning or at noon. I found the most profound improvements in people's health was with water fasting at True North for up to 40 days. Now, I'm not suggesting people do more than a couple day water fast on their own. We were monitoring, this is medically supervised at True North. But I've definitely seen more health benefit from doing a water fast for 48 hours compared to just intermittent fasting. But just like any amount of exercise is good, any amount of fasting is good, and just figure out where you are today and do a little bit more.
And I think that, if we think about what nature designed for us, then at least in a tropical country like mine, you can't, if you're living in nature, you can't eat before sunrise and you can't eat after sunset. And so that's already intermittent fasting. We were meant to fast during the night or when it's dark. And so intermittent fasting is good. The best time to eat is when the sunlight is out. And um, I think that, our body tells us when we need to fast, especially when we're sick, we don't feel like eating. And, if you're really sick, even the taste on your tongue changes so that you don't eat. So the body's telling you what to do. But often when we're sick or when we have fever, someone in the home says, at least eat something. And I think that's because, you know, if you see someone who's able to eat, you know that they're not too bad. So, and the family members say, eat something. But if we learn to listen to our body all the time, our body will be able to tell us not to eat when we really shouldn't eat. So fasting is good when you're sick. Fasting is intermittent fasting is good. And I think if we were living in nature, there would be times of feast and famine. And so automatically we would have to have days when we couldn't eat. So I think that if we can now, we live in a time of plenty, there's always food available. But if we can have that ritual of fasting, it can be really helpful.
Thank you. What are some key health metrics that individuals can monitor to assess their risk and progress in preventing or reversing disease?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm focused on reversing Alzheimer's or preventing Alzheimer's. So the metric I'm often looking at is memory tests or computerized tests that might last anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour. And of course, there are apps now where you can test yourself and see how your brain is, your reaction time, your memory, etc. But in terms of other metrics you can look at your blood pressure, your heart rate. You can look at your weight. Those are things that come to mind.
And also, you can look at your blood sugar because most people who have diabetes at least have a glucometer, and it's really easy to check this for anyone, anytime. So, these are things that we can look at all the time. That's actually the reason why I wrote a book on reversing diabetes, because I thought that anyone can take this book and use it because they can check their blood sugar at any time and see whether they're improving or not. And they can see how amazing the body is in healing if we do the right things.
What is the role of digestive enzymes and can digestive enzymes, should we be taking them when with our food or is it not necessary?
Should I answer?
Sure.
Sure. Yes.
So I never recommend anything extra because I'm always looking at what is the cause of this problem. But if there's a reason why a certain digestive enzyme is not available, then I would use it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I agree. So I normally am not a fan of digestive enzymes, except in the limited case where I have a patient with, say, pancreatitis, or their normal digestive system is not working. Yeah, I can see in that situation helping. I'm a fan of systemic enzymes like nattokinase and lumbrokinase for patients who may have biofilm or a clotting tendency. So I'm not opposed to enzymes in general, but I don't think most people need digestive enzymes.
Okay. For individuals who are already experiencing significant cognitive decline, what realistic expectations should they have regarding potential reversal through integrative approaches?
Yeah, so this is really exciting because the bottom line is there is hope today. I mean, I've been reversing Alzheimer's and dementia now for 6 years. So, and it's such a great feeling when a patient who used to have dementia, who doesn't anymore, comes and says, Dr. Josh, you gave me my life back. It's so cool that someone can either go back to work or, back to their family and experience life. So the key thing is finding an integrative doctor like myself who specializes in this area and is willing to use cutting edge technologies. Because unfortunately, if you go to your typical primary care doctor or a neurologist, what most of them are going to be told is, there's really not a lot of hope. Sure, we'll put you on this medication. It's not really it's going to slow down the course, but we can't reverse it. And that's why it's really exciting that if you do everything right, if you focus on the lifestyle, smart supplementation, and some of these newer cutting edge technologies that focus on regeneration, it's it's exciting that we can reverse Alzheimer's, and that's the most important message: is there is hope, and you should be seeking it out. Just like with Dr. Shah and reversing diabetes, it's like what you just need to see a couple patients, couple people that happens to, and you're like, yeah, we can reverse diabetes. But if you talk to a traditional allopathic physician in this country, they'll be like, you can't do that. We weren't taught that in medical school. What is Dr. Shah doing?
And I don't want to say much about this because I don't have enough experience in this field.
Okay. What do you do if your children come to you and they go, I don't want to eat vegan diets because I need protein. I'm young. I want to have muscles and I need protein. And everyone agrees with them and says, yeah, you need protein. What is how do you address the common concerns about the quality and bioavailability of plant-based protein? Dr. Shah, you want to start with that one?
Sure. So I tell them that look at horses, cows, and even elephants, or all the animals that we might be eating. Where do they get their protein? And greens have proteins, beans have protein. Protein is a food for growth and repair. Anything that's going to grow has protein. So, nuts, seeds, grains, beans, all of these are actually seeds that will grow into a plant, and so they always have protein, but every single cell has protein. DNA and RNA is protein. So we can't escape protein. And no one suffers from dietary deficiency of protein unless they're underfed. So if we're eating just a regular whole food plant-based diet, protein deficiency is very rare. I never recommend protein supplements, not even plant-based supplements. And I am on the other end where I'm seeing patients who are actually suffering from diseases of protein excess, like gout and kidney disease and acidity and um, autoimmune diseases in a sense, and allergies, and um, uh, I'm forgetting one that was on my mind, but in general, yeah, osteoporosis. So all these diseases are caused by excess protein and can be reversed by making lifestyle changes. So we can even prevent them by not going into the whole protein story. So I always say that, if you want to know what to eat and what not to eat, think about the things that are not advertised, because nobody's going to advertise what nature or God designed for us, what's in our instincts. And that's why we don't see advertisements for apples and oranges or cucumbers and carrots, but we do see advertisements for whey protein and protein supplements and even dairy or meat or whatever.
Yeah, and I agree with Dr. Shah. Basically, if you look most people are not protein deficient. So that's number one. Number two, instead of being, most people are deficient in fiber in their diet, not protein. We're designed as humans to get at least 100 grams a day of fiber in our diet, and the average American gets maybe between 15 to 30 grams a day. So that's number one. The other part of the protein discussion I'll have is I'll basically twist it and I'll say, really, you think that the um the plant protein is not high enough quality? Well, if that's true, if you really want the highest quality protein that resemble human protein, then what you should be doing is you should be you should be eating humans. You should become a cannibal and eat humans because human protein is the closest to humans. And most people in our society are like, no, I don't really want to eat other people. So from that standard, yeah. So, but again, I normally go back and say, like, why are you even asking this question? It's because our society's been brainwashed by the food industry to ask about protein. Now, it is true 100 years ago, there definitely was protein malnourishment in the United States, but that's not the current world we live in.
Okay. What is the role of fermented foods in supporting a healthy gut and other just in fermented foods in general? What are your both of your thoughts? Is this something that's neutral? Is this something we should try to add, like raw sauerkraut or something like that?
Yeah, I think it depends. I mean, I'm not a fan of alcohol, which is produced through fermentation. I'm not opposed to sauerkraut, but unfortunately, the commercially available sauerkrauts normally have high levels of sodium. You can make sauerkraut without lots of added salt. But again, if you were to go out and buy in a store sauerkraut, it's normally high levels of sodium. So again, to my mind, it depends. The devil's in the details. So just because something's fermented doesn't make it good for you. I am a fan of introducing some fermented items into your diet, but again, definitely not alcohol and not high sodium sauerkraut.
I agree, and I actually love fermented foods, but I always say, listen to your body, and if you love it, have it, because we don't need to have probiotics every day in order to keep our gut microbiome in place. We just need to avoid anything that will destroy it, like chemicals and, medicines are also chemicals, and definitely antibiotics as far as possible. So, yeah. Um,
Dr. Shah, if someone wants to follow up with you to get more information, do you have a website? Is there a way to stay in touch with you to get your book,
y-
etc.?
yes, sure. They can go to our website at Sharan. It's sharan-india.org. And thank you for sharing that. So it's sharan-india.org, or they can write to info@sharan-india.org. And we have all kinds of resources available. There's an FAQ section. We have 600 recipes that are whole food plant-based. We also have consultants. We have doctors, nutritionists, counselors. We have someone handling acute problems as well. So anyone can come, and we do all our consultations online. So all of this is available. And thank you for sharing our website, Stephen, and thank you for inviting me here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shah. Dr. Helman, how can someone stay in touch with you? Do you offer consultations? Do you have a website?
Yes, definitely. And again, thanks for including us, Stephen. This is an amazing conference. So to find me, go to drjosh.com, drjosh.com. And my email address is simply drjosh, drjosh, at drjosh.com. And I've got a weekly podcast on reversing Alzheimer's that you can find at drjosh.com/podcast. And you can also find me on social media under Green Brains MD, Green Brains with an S MD. And I really appreciate that you're putting this together for us.
Thank you very much. We both appreciate, and if we could unmute the audience so we could all say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot.
Thank
That
you
was
both.
great.
Thank you all
Thank you
three
so much.
so much.
You could say
Thank you.